Well, good morning. You're listening to WXOX 97.1 FM in Louisville, Kentucky, or perhaps you are listening to us through the streaming on artfm.com or with our app. You can take us with you everywhere you go. This is LVA's Artebella on the radio, the show produced by Louisville Visual Art. I'm host Keith Waits, here to talk today to Sara Noori. Sara is a multimedia artist who graduated summa cum laude with a BFA from the Hite Institute at University of Louisville, and has been an artist and arts educator for more than 10 years in both Chicago and Louisville. Right now, they are one of the more than 75 artists participating in Open Studio Louisville, a month of Saturdays in which artists open their workspaces to the public. You will find Sara at Art Sanctuary on October 16th, 23rd, and 30th, Art Sanctuary 1433 South Shelby Street. And you can go to louisvillevisualart.com and go under events, Open Studio. You can see all the stuff you need to know about how you can join in and participate. And I'm sure after you listen to Sara in this interview, you will be excited to go visit her in her studio personally. Sara, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Keith.
So let's start with just the basic question. So somebody is trying to decide whether to come to your studio or not. What kind of work are they going to find there? What are you about as an artist right now?
Well, I would say come to see me because you want to meet a new person, because I want to meet you, and look for art that is colorful. As a multidisciplinary artist, I bring painting into my work. I'm working in resin currently. I've also got some miniature sculptures that I've been working in. And they can just, come see the work as it is now in progress, where I'm moving from my painting work also into 3D work. And then I'm an art educator. So hopefully I'll be meeting people who are interested in talking about that as well, and seeing where that goes.
So you mentioned that that you're sort of moving from two-dimensional to three-dimensional. When I go to your website, which is saranoori.com, is that correct?
Yes. Yeah.
And that is Sara, S-A-R-A, no H, Noori.com, which to me just seems like that's the simplest way you would spell that. But anyway, so when I look at the website under the section that shows your work to galleries, it seems like I'm looking at a lot of paintings, a lot of two-dimensional work, which are, like you say, very colorful. In sort of a mix, there's some things that seem abstract. There's some things that seem like representational, maybe flowers and things like that, but they've been pushed to a point of abstraction. And then there were even a few things that seemed very much surrealistic. So is there a chronology to that, or do you find yourself working in all these different ways?
Yes, so it started with my work in the BFA show, is what you'll see that looks more like surrealism, or is akin to surrealism, which are the still lifes. And those kind of started my maximalist approach to art making. My dad was from Iran, so growing up, there's a lot of heavy patterning, and some of those motifs that I put into my still lifes made it into those works. And I was really interested in texture. I was really interested in, chiaroscuro and kind of the two-dimensional, three-dimensional play in painting. And so once I finished that body of work, I kind of wanted to experiment doing things on a larger scale. And I was also trained, in oil painting. And I know that we have a connection with Dennis Whitehouse, who taught me how to oil paint at Ballard High School. And I went into U of L and continued on with that. And after I graduated from U of L, I moved to Illinois, and I was an intern with the Museum of Contemporary Art in their education department. And I was kind of just expanding in more ways than one. And I decided, okay, instead of just doing oil painting, how can I challenge myself? And decided, what could acrylic do for me? And also looking at its like chemical makeup of being more plastic and malleable,
Right.
kind of letting that feed into the work. So then I started doing work in plastic and manipulating the paint, or I say in plastic, but in acrylic, and then manipulating the paint after it was a little bit dry, and seeing what I could do to like paint images and peel them up and then manipulate them onto the canvas became really interesting to me, because again, it was kind of like a continuation of the representation of three-dimensional space or lack thereof. And is it a object as a painting, or is it a depiction of an object? So I got very interested in that conversation in art history. And then I just decided, okay, I really like the aspect of like painting with texture, like literal texture, instead of painting texture as fabric, which I did it a lot in my BFA work. I started to kind of make the texture by making the paint into the object, putting it on the canvas. And then came the work that was more large in scale. And those are the abstract pieces. And those are the series Tears in the Dance Hall, which are multimedia pieces with hair, rope, plastic, and lots of other things, glitter, you know, the fun stuff. And I was melting and braiding, and those are around they kind of range in scale from 3 by 4 foot to 6 by maybe 6 feet. And that's kind of the through line of where paint goes into all of them, and then timeline, how it kind of worked. I don't know if that answers your question, but.
No, it does. It's always interesting to me why an artist, well, most everything about artists are interesting to me, but like why an artist paints and then does something else. And sometimes it seems like it's, you know, the choice might be to break away from something and go and try different mediums because of the difference. But it sounds like you had a very organic sort of natural development in which the paint itself led you to working three-dimensionally. So that's interesting.
Yeah. Thank you. Yes, and I would also.
So are you? No, I was going to say, are you working? Go ahead with your statement, though.
Oh, I was just going to add something that I think may be of importance in explaining it too. I got into performance art, like softly, not as seriously as the painting, but at the time when I was doing the large scale, like multimedia pieces, the Tears in the Dance Hall series, that's when I got into performing. So I would actually take my paintings and wear them as a garment and kind of paint myself as a painting. So that was kind of, it has extended from that point. And now it's kind of like a really nice coupling of the two things. I'd like to think it's not it doesn't strictly look the same, but that's where I was going from. Okay, experimenting with what painting can be and how it can look in my work. And then also who am I? What is my identity? And how is painting or my art practice related to my identity? And then pulling that into drag and performance, and being a queer artist and a queer person.
So, you know, it seems like performance art has come up in several conversations that I've been having recently in some other interviews. I was talking to Andrew Marsh and Farrell Fagiola about they're metal sculptors, but it's about the process of doing a pour and things like that, and how that becomes performative, and how they're leaning into that. And I can't help but feel I'm hopeful, I'm excited, and I'd be interested to know what you think about this. I feel like there's been no performance art happening in Louisville, really, you know, that I can think of in terms of a gallery or an opening or anything like that, or at least it's very rare. And I'm kind of starting to sense maybe there's more interest and maybe it's going to start happening. So what kind of like right now, we're here to talk about Open Studio, and you may very well be doing some of this during your open studio hours. But do you want to see have that opportunity? Do you want to have an exhibit or an opening or a special event, a public event where you do more performance art? Is that something you're seeking out?
Well, I'm glad that you brought that up as a concept. And I feel like, well, one, I just did a performance piece with the University of Louisville and was lucky enough to work with a chair, Mary Carruthers, and her grad
Mhm.
student to do a commemoration for the 20-year mark of 9/11. So I actually designed and worked with Mary to do a performance piece for that work. And I'm really excited to hear other artists like these metal workers, Andrew Marsh, and the other artists that you mentioned, viewing their work as performance already. And I think that there's so many things going in culturally now that performance art is going to take on, I feel like, a whole new meaning to a lot of people. And it's a lot more accessible. And for me, recently doing it at U of L, it just was in a year when we've been so separated physically, performing with other people was a great joy to bring people together and have community. And it was like a ritual that we could all use for healing and be equals, because it's not just me giving someone a work that they respond to. It's all these artists coming together to create something and adding into the work.
Mhm.
And then the audience being participants. So that kind of brings equity into an art space, which I don't know is always as easily accessible. So that's why I love performance in a lot of ways. And in the most recent way of doing it, it was really, I feel like, a chance for healing, a chance for community and connection. And I feel like in 2021, we need that.
Well, and I apologize because I remember seeing your name and connected to that, and I was not able to go to that. So, but yes, I should have been aware that that had happened.
It's all good.
But
Talk about
yeah,
it.
yeah, yeah.
All good.
But
For those who know, it's there's so many things going on simultaneously. So no worries.
well, and do you feel like, I don't know, how aware are you of the history? Because I feel like sometimes when you talk to people who've been around for a while, you talk about performance art, everybody starts thinking of like the '60s and some really goofy things. So sort of almost exhibitionistic sort of qualities to a lot of the landmark work that happened in that time period. And it seems like, do you feel like, I'm not sure what I'm getting at, except that it's like when you step into something that hasn't been so current, it seems like that memory can be sort of a baggage, right? That you have to sort of deal with in terms of saying when you call something performance art. Uh,
Yeah.
to what do you attribute this sort of, if I'm right, this sort of renewed interest? Do you think it's related to the pandemic and the need for a community? Is there some sort of desire for these kinds of more open experiences?
I think for me it was it, and I also think it was the context in which I was asked to create work. I think I was asked to create something that held space for a public memorial.
Hmm.
Thought I could best honor the public and this memorial um, with others instead of trying to be the only one who has the mic, to share that with all of us who experience that moment and that grief. So that, I think, is specific to the context of that ask. Um, and I think I don't have, I want to speak like with respect to the long history of performance art and my small space in it, and I found it initially through drag, which is akin to the exhibitionism of the 60s and 70s, and I think is still very, very important. But I also think that in relation to that, you've also got, everyone's got their 15 minutes of fame. And in that way, with social media, we kind of practice small elements of performance art in our daily lives now. So it looks different to us. And we feel different about the personal space, the private and the public space of our lives. I think may be different than how it was viewed in the past. But I can't say because I haven't focused on it enough in my studies, but I think it's very interesting. And I think for me, it also helped me as I was identifying and feeling more comfortable with myself. Performance art allowed me to get into that because it is a role that we play. We all play roles. So it was a empowerment for me.
Mhm. It also strikes me though that, I alluded earlier, I'm not sure if we were recording yet, talking about like, I was asking you how to describe you as an artist, and that so many people are multimedia or interdisciplinary, that artists don't like to be pinned down to one sort of medium or identity or whatever. And they want to be more fluid, and they also want to be more collaborative. And it seems like performance art is such an incredible opportunity to break down barriers between visual art and theater or dance or music performance, and the way you can combine those sort of elements up. And that maybe when I talk about that I miss it, I'd like to see more have it happening. Maybe it's happening more along the lines of in theater. Because if you go to a gallery, people can for some reason be uncomfortable with a performance element in a way that going to the theater, they sort of know to expect whatever comes across the stage.
That's so interesting.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I just agree with you. It's just the
Yeah.
context. If is it the suspension of disbelief? We go in and we know to expect this, and it helps us let our guard down. I mean, I do, to that question about collaborating, I think that we are looking for that. Some of us, I mean, I can only speak for myself, but I do think that having space from one another, which was really needed for me in a lot of ways, from the rush and the hustle and the bustle. I don't think I know I don't want to go back to the way things were in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that it has really dawned on me that collaboration is even more important. And maybe that comes from my interest in the classroom too, because I view my teaching experience as collaboration. So it's an extension of that as well. So, yeah. But theater is a great place where collaboration is welcomed, and it's so different than a gallery experience. So I would agree with you on a personal level there.
I worked on an exhibit for LVA a few years ago where it was so I won't do names just for whatever reason, but it was a noted photographer and who was photographing a model on different parts of a landscape and on a specific area of land. And so then there was also an audio element in which somebody who was experienced as a radio reporter did something like that, but just independently, not where they were sort of documenting and recording this experience of going around the landscape. And so then when it came time to do the installation, the model wanted to do a piece of performance, a very simple piece, which was that she would, because she was nude in the images, she would be nude under an arrangement of these wisteria vines that were lit so that it threw shadows on her body. And I thought it was a very simple element in ways that as long as she was willing to do it. But I could see that people were maybe uncomfortable with it. Maybe they were mocking it a little bit sometimes. Like it wasn't as easy to accept that as it was to accept the images or even the audio that they were hearing. But the presence of that person was difficult. And I don't mean it. I think it worked. It's not a failure, but because I think that's exactly what performance art is going to do. It's going to provoke a different sort of response and make people perhaps uncomfortable. Now, do you think your work makes people feel uncomfortable? Like in this piece you just did, I'm guessing that maybe not in that context.
Well, I think that's a really good question as to the heart of a lot of what artists want from their work is, are you trying to provoke? Are you trying to empower? Are you trying to, initiate a conversation? So And that way, you know, the body is just an extension of that. And because we're humans in a space with other humans, there's something different energetically that just happens when two people are in a space together. So if that person is embodying their art in a very like, I am the performer, I am the art piece, you're going to exchange the energy that you would maybe within an inanimate object in a more immediate way. So the static painting on the wall would be the place where you could, you know, it's provoking thought in you and having these things come up in you. But maybe it's more palpable when there's other humans directly, you know, you're having an energetic connection. So I think that's happening in all work to more or less of a degree, and it may be more palpable with a human experience of performers. That's just my guess. And then in my work, with specifically the 9/11 piece, I was really there to hold space for people to have a point of reflection and a point of healing from something that was really a traumatic experience and a great loss that I said my words really can't even begin to articulate that depth. So I just want to hold space for that with the performance, to honor people and to honor their feelings and to honor the people that we've lost, you know. And then with my own work, other than that, where I've dressed up and it's drag and I'm, you know, going out and it's part of my art, it's just for me, it's an empowerment for me. And when I see others in that space, I feel empowered because its authenticity is empowering to me. You know, when people are living in their authentic selves with joy, I think that's really empowering. So, and it's expressed through art specifically, because that could get a little bit of a gray area. What's authenticity? I'm telling you how I feel that's authentic, is that, you know, but it's through art. I feel like that is very empowering to me.
Well, I saw a quote once from a great screenwriter in which they said, and they were talking in the context of like Hollywood movies or American movies, Hollywood versus maybe independent, but saying that you know, art challenges entertainment. I forgot the word he used, but it soothes you. It's like it doesn't push you, it doesn't challenge you. It just sort of, you know. But then we talk about, so that here I'm now thinking about like, you know, when you talk about drag, I mean, I've seen drag shows and I always thought of them as entertainment. They were like cabaret, or they were like, you know, whatever. There's something about them, but I guess I never thought of them originally as art, you know, and that could be one of those places, one of those intersections, right, of like entertainment and art, theater and what, I'm not even sure if visual art is the right word, but I think really when we're talking about the concept of performance art, yes, that does seem like a place where that comes together. Does that
Yes.
Is that?
Yeah, most definitely. Yeah. Most definitely. That's what I guess too. That's what inspired me to leave just always doing 2D work, because as I was more embodied in these ideas and feeling more empowered, it wasn't enough to have a world on a canvas that was just the, you know, that is within the bounds of that space. I wanted to see it live in my world all the time, and it's doable. And I'm lucky to live in a place and to have certain privileges that allow me to do so. And the ones that I don't have, I'm working really hard to get. So that's, yeah, that's what it was about for me, I think, in a lot of ways.
Well, what privileges do you not have, or am I asking a question you don't want to answer?
Well, thank you for asking that.
Because I'm curious, because I want to know what actions you're taking. So, but I think first we identify.
Yeah, I mean, I think as a person of color, and someone, even though I identify as non-binary, they, them, a person who is read as female, but is also queer, you know, a person with a Muslim last name, which, you know, during the time of 9/11 could make you the target of a lot of hate.
Mhm.
And being biracial, just fitting into demographics that perhaps there's privilege in those, but there's also their minority statuses.
Mhm.
These are things that bring me a certain kind of awareness in my life. You know, we all have privileges, and I have privileges too, but there's other things that make it a little bit more difficult at times to get your voice heard or to be taken seriously, or to have, you know, your work. I don't know how to say it in a good sound bite, but those are the things that I think, the things that make me unique are also the things that may not necessarily always be a privilege, but my uniqueness is the thing that I'm loving about myself, and that's the thing that I'm working for. Like, seeing my uniqueness as a strength. And maybe that's where you're interviewing these other artists that are part of like the BIPOC community, that are part of the queer community. And it's like, we're seeing each other now a lot more.
Mhm.
And it's really beautiful, like how it's blossoming and how more people are interested in our stories and interested in our art. And we're like making space for each other. And that's what I mean by like working towards having more privilege, is like us being proud of who I am and exploring that, but also holding if I get the door open for me, holding it open for others. And again, that's like where I feel like I always go back to how important my work in education is, because I feel like that's where you pay it forward, and that's where you give and receive in like this, ideally in this equal way, that I feel like is one of my top priorities always.
Well, and it also occurs to me when you talk about all these different aspects of who you are, your identity, your history, your background, whatever. Do you find that people make assumptions? Like you said you had a Muslim last name, and I remember having this conversation with Shohei Katayama, that he said sometimes because his name is Katayama, people think they're going to go to an exhibit with you know, ink on rice paper, right? It's like, what is an Asian artist, you know? And people, even if they try to be open, tend to have assumptions about different kinds of cultural backgrounds. Do you ever find that's the case with you because of your name or because of or anything like that? Or
I mean, I think that I think that let me think about how to respond to this. Um, my identity has always been a point of interest for others.
Mhm.
And that's something that it matters how it's contextualized in the person asking the questions. So for Shohei and myself, maybe we've experienced something similar where people are making presumptions based on what they know about a last name or a country or a culture, and then asking a question to us that doesn't have relevance to us as, you know, as artists or as people.
Right.
But it's nice now to know that there are more artists that are being interviewed that are like me, and I found a queer community in Chicago, and I'm finding that here, that we make space for each other just to get to know each other on one-to-one basis. And I feel like that's kind of what this interview is doing. That's, you know, hopefully that's like the goal, you know, it's just to get to know someone on a one-to-one basis. And for me, that's what's a breath of fresh air. And the thing I'm looking most forward to and being back to Louisville is like coming back, feeling confident in my identity, feeling excited about my art, and getting interviewed in a way that is like an open book. Like, you tell me, you know what I mean? That always feels good, because then it's like, Yeah, I don't know if that answers the question.
No, it does. And these aren't you said, you referenced earlier something about a soundbite. Well, what I hope this show is a place where you don't feel like you need to make a soundbite, but can talk a little bit more fully about some of these things. But they're also not always, even given that opportunity, it's not always easy. Um, but let me ask you about, so you've taught a lot. What was it? And I feel like when I looked through your background, you had done that not too long after you came out of school, out of University of Louisville. So you've been an arts educator most of your adult life, I guess. So what is, besides the sort of practical idea that, hey, whether you can make a living as an artist, teaching's like a nice practical application of that. Where does the motivation for teaching come from? You kind of referred to it earlier, so I guess I'm going back to that when you talked about how the classroom was a performance space for you. Talk a little bit about what art education, what teaching art is to you.
Yeah, teaching art education has been the like highlight so far in my work as an artist.
Mm-hmm.
I love my studio practice, but it was when I moved to Illinois and I was interning and then later working at the MCA, and just also simultaneously I had my own classroom that I started in Geneva at kind of akin to Preston Arts Center.
Mm-hmm.
I approached this person and said, I would like to teach classes at your art supply store, and I think it would be really beautiful to also involve the community. And it was just a really wonderful breath of fresh air to meet so many wonderful artists that were so genuine and in the moment and learning. And kids are just beautiful. Kids are wonderful. I just feel like they brighten my world, in a time where art school and being in a institution like a museum can be very rigid and at times a little bit self-serious, so grandiose, to the point where it dampens the spirit of creativity. Being around students and children is a renewal. Like, this is what art is. That's when I felt like I connected with my inner artist, is when I would work with children and they would just be beautiful on their own, making wonderful work. And I was there to impart some of the wisdom that I had learned. And then it was like a back and forth. So it just felt like there was an equity there. And then I was allowing them to have a space to create work. It was empowering for both of us. So I think it was great, or all of us, hopefully. So
Empowerment came up a lot in this interview. It's obviously an important idea to you.
Yes, most definitely.
It should be to all of us.
Thank you. I would like to think so, because for me, when you're empowered, you can be whole in yourself, but you can also hold space for others. And when I look at a lot of the things that have happened in the last year, it's, where is the balance of power, and where is the imbalance of power, and who's feeling empowered and who's not, and those things to me are, when I talk about empowerment, I feel like it has a very wide net to me of what I mean when I say that word. And I think that when you're working with your own voice as an artist, to have someone else, and that's where the collaboration of the classroom comes in. Mm-hmm. When you have someone else to be a sounding board or mirror what you're thinking or saying, it's a very empowered place to be at. And then you leave that space more like, I can only give it like how do you translate this to words? Like, it feels good, and you bring a good energy with you outside of the space, for lack of a better word.
Okay. Well, Sara Noori, I think we will. I think that's a good place to stop. I think that's a good note to end on. So we just talked to Sara Noori, who is doing Open Studio Louisville. It's no longer Open Studio Weekend. It's a whole month of Saturdays, and Sarah's doing 3 of them: October 16th, 23rd, and the 30th at Art Sanctuary, 1433 South Shelby Street. Go upstairs, and that's where the artists can be found. So thank you so much, Sara. This was a pleasure.
Thank you, Keith. It was my pleasure. Thank you.